Will Worsham joins us now for this week's Speaking Legal discussion, where he answers a viewer's legal question on air. Let's take a look at today's question. My husband and I are considering bankruptcy because our credit cards have gotten out of control, but we're afraid of losing our house. What can we do?
Okay. Well, first of all, there's good news here because you can go through a bankruptcy, either a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13. And usually, I mean, everything's dependent on the facts of any particular case. But usually, if you want to keep your house, you can keep your house. Now, the difference is there's two different types of debt that we deal with. We deal with secured debt and unsecured debt. Credit cards are typically unsecured debt. That means there's no assets pledged against that debt. Okay? So like a mortgage on your house is a secured debt because the house itself is backing, is what's securing the debt. So if you don't pay your mortgage on your house, the bank can come and take the house to satisfy the debt. That's the difference between a secured debt and an unsecured debt. So we have some legitimate concern here. If we declare bankruptcy, that means we're not paying the debt. The bank would have the right to come and take that house. So what do we do? First of all, we've got to make sure that we are current on our mortgage payments. We've got to be good with the bank. We can't owe them money because regardless of a bankruptcy, but for a temporary halt on the automatic stay, they would eventually be able to foreclose and take the house if we don't remain current with them. So one thing we're going to want to do is be current with the lender on the mortgage property on the house. Then once we get into the bankruptcy process, we're going to go through something that's called just reaffirming the debt. It's really simple. You go back to that lender and say, yeah, you're subject to the bankruptcy, but we're going to reaffirm after the filing of the bankruptcy that we do owe you the money, and we are going to be obligated on the money. And most of the time, almost all the time, the bank just wants their money. They don't want to go through the foreclosure. They don't want to do all that stuff. So if you are current with the bank and you do reaffirm the debt, you are going to be able to keep your house going through a bankruptcy, still discharging all the unsecured debt. It happens all the time.
See, I didn't realize that that was tied to that. I know that if you start a business and you connect it to your house, and the business is failing, of course, then you can lose your house. But I never thought about that with the credit card.
Well, it's the same type of thing. A lot of times, a lot of people do, in order to get the money to start a business, whether it be through a small business loan or another loan, is they will pledge their house as security for that business loan. That then puts your house in jeopardy of that debt. Sometimes that's in the form of a second mortgage. You know, sometimes you get a HELOC, a home equity line of credit that you use for that. But it's the same thing. It's still just a secured loan that's secured by particular property.
Now, is it different? I mean, it is substantially different, I guess, the difference between the Chapter 7, Chapter 13. Because in one of them you're saying, I'm done with all of it, aren't
Yeah, the difference is a Chapter 7 is what's called a fresh start bankruptcy. That means we file the bankruptcy, we discharge the debts. If there's any assets that are available for forfeit and sale to pay back some creditors, they're taken, they're sold. Which there's all these exemptions of bankruptcy. We'll probably cover some other time. Because it's not like you come and lose all your stuff. There's some process to that. And you get a fresh start. You don't have to pay anymore. Now, Chapter 13 is called a reorganization. That's where you don't lose any of your stuff, none of your assets are seized. You just go into a process with the court, with the trustee, with the judge, and you make a repayment plan over the next 3 to 5 years. And as long as the court approves that and you keep to the plan, then at the end of that 3 to 5 year repayment plan, if you do still owe money on those debts, they're discharged at that time.
Okay, but isn't there, if you can get out of bankruptcy, I mean, the credit card companies will work with you, is that correct?
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the question. You mean once you're in bankruptcy, can you still get a credit card?
Isn't it better? Because they were saying we're thinking of doing, wouldn't it be better to work with the credit card companies and avoid the bankruptcy altogether if you can?
It really depends. Sometimes you can work with credit card companies. You can go through a debt settlement process. The difficulty with that sometimes is you may not get the deal that you want. Before the credit card companies are typically willing to work with you, you have to be significantly in arrearage with your payment plan. I mean, 90
it almost
days.
has to be planned.
Yeah, you're going to get really behind with them before they're even willing to negotiate with you. They may file lawsuits before they're willing to settle with you.
Yeah, that's not good.
You've got this big history on your credit record of lates and defaults and public records that really wreck your credit score, maybe even worse than a bankruptcy would. What's really great about a bankruptcy is kind of like ripping a Band-Aid off. As soon as you rip it off, I mean, the healing starts. You go forward from there.
Best thing to do if you're considering that, of course, is seek an attorney's advice, guidance.
And most bankruptcy attorneys will do a zero-charge intro. So check it out.
That's
there you
fantastic.
are. Now, if you have a legal question for Will, you can email him at wworsham@color10.com. And, of course, he will answer your question on the show. Will Worsham, always good to see you.
Oh, thanks for coming in.
You're
All
welcome.
right.
All right, if you want flowers, you have to visit the Flower Fairy. That's right. We'll have that when we come back.